long ago did the first people come to North America? Carbon-14 dating of artifacts and fossils has shown that the first Americans came to this continent from Asia at least 35,000 years ago. Early people probably crossed from the Asian continent to North America over a land bridge at the Bering Strait. They came following herds of animals on which they depended for food and clothing. As they traveled south, they found warmer climates and rich prairies of grass where game was plentiful. No one can say for certain when these paleo or ancient hunters first reached the land we call Texas. These nomadic people left little behind that has withstood the centuries. 20,000 years or even more might someday be proven, but for now, archaeologists have found positive evidence that humans were in Texas at least 11,000 years ago. By comparison, the United States of America is just over 200 years old, 2 centuries. The first people of Texas were here at least 110 centuries ago, 11,000 years. Like a giant puzzle, the story of the ancient Texans is being put together piece by piece at archaeological sites across the state. The first piece of this puzzle can be found here in the Texas Panhandle. 10,000 years ago, this dry river channel ran full with water. To the north about 1,200 miles, the continent was covered by the frozen expanse of the last ice age, but here on the southern plains, the climate was mild. Paleo hunters came here to mine flint for their weapons. The land today is scarred with over 550 quarry pits where flint was taken out, and the ground is littered with flint chips from mining operations of 10,000 years ago. The flint they sought was Alibates flint, a type found nowhere else in the world. The difference was in the color. Bands of cream, red, blue, and gray set this flint apart and probably made it even more valuable to ancient hunters. The 5-square-mile area is protected today in the Alibates National Monument on the shores of Lake Meredith in the Texas Panhandle.
It's located outcrops of the flint up and down the river for about 4 or 5 miles and back up these little side canyons for a mile or two. And as far as we know, this is the only place that this flint's found. And it is a unique area. You know, there's no other place like it anywhere. When the archaeologists are excavating sites, and no matter how far away it is, when they find this flint, they know where it came from. Because there's no other place it's found except right here. As far as our information is right now, this is it. The outcrop of flint along the edge of this bluff ranges from about 3 to 5 feet thick. There's huge boulders of flint up here, but all the little pieces are broken up by the Indians.
The hunter that carried a blank, or big chunk, of this flint was a wealthy man. He could trade it for food or animal skins, anything he might desire, or he could chip off a piece the size he needed and make a spear point or an axe. Shaping the point is called flint knapping. Pressure is applied to the edge of the flint with a hard tool, such as a deer antler, and flakes of the flint break off the opposite side. The process is very tedious and takes great skill. But armed with these flint weapons, the ancient hunters traveled and traded widely across the continent. The animals they hunted were the megafauna, or giant animals. We know they existed only by their fossilized bones today. At the Panhandle Plains Museum in Canyon, Texas, on the campus of West Texas A&M University, the fossilized remains of these animals have been assembled. We can get an idea of the size and variety of animal life at that time. Bison antiquus was only one of a succession of giant ancestors to the modern bison. Giant ground sloths that stood 10 feet tall on its hind legs drank from ancient water holes. There were even camels in Texas at that time that stood 8 feet tall. and herds of mammoths, the ancient ancestor to the elephant, roamed the prairie. The plains of 11,000 years ago provided rich hunting for Texas' first inhabitants, and spear points made of Alabates flint were often the weapons used. Clovis Point were the oldest known flint points found. These 6 to 8 inch spear points were used 10,000 to 12,000 years ago to kill large game. Folsom Point, smaller and distinguished by the large fluted depression where the flint attached to the spear shaft, were also developed. Plainview points with deep notches along the edges were used as early as 10,000 years ago. All of these points have been found in different locations in Texas. 200 miles to the south of Alabates National Monument, more evidence of these ancient people can be found. Spear points of Alabates flint have been found here where hunters' camps have been excavated in and around Caprock Canyon State Park. New findings are made quite often about the people who lived and hunted here 10,000 years ago. This is the edge of the Caprock Escarpment, the southeast limit of the Great Plains. Cliffs here reach 500 feet in some places. Above the escarpment, the plains stretch away thousands of miles toward the Rocky Mountains. But here, below the cliffs, early hunters found protection from the winds of the prairie and plentiful water and game in the canyons. The headwaters of the Red River created these canyons. Today, in this semi-arid climate, it's hard to imagine a river large enough and powerful enough to carve these canyon walls. The river is a mere trickle most of the year, fed by underground springs and sparse rainfall. But 10,000 years ago, the climate was much milder and more humid. The vegetation was thick with low brush and rich grasses. Mammoth bones are often found in old campsites that are excavated. Hunters probably used the surround method to kill these giant beasts. Several hunters would surround the animal at the water hole and close in for the kill. It would have been dangerous work for these men armed only with flint spears to bring the giant animal down. One of the most interesting artifacts found in the park is this altar made of a giant bison skull held up by bison jawbones. This tells us these early people probably worshipped the bison as an important food source. It provided food, clothing, and shelter for the natives and required great skill to kill, but a successful hunt meant survival for the entire tribe. At Lubbock Lake Landmark on the outskirts of Lubbock, Texas, Dr. Eileen Johnson directs work on dig sites that have revealed valuable information about prehistoric times. This location was discovered during a city project to dredge the old lake bed. It was part of the headwater channel of the Brazos River called Yellow House Draw. Today, the park is maintained by the Texas Park System, and an excellent museum and learning center are operated by Texas Tech University. Around 10,000 years ago, early Texans hunted the giant mammoth here. Splintered pieces of huge mammoth bones give evidence that these people probably smashed the bones with rocks to get to the rich marrow inside. Around 8,000 years ago, a new ingenious tool improved the accuracy of the weapons. Hunters used an atlatl along with a spear. The atlatl was a grooved stick that helped propel the spear farther, faster, and with more force. The hunter would lay his spear in the groove of the atlatl with its blunt end against the peg or spike. He would then hold the atlatl with one hand, balancing the spear with his fingertips. When he thrust the spear, he held on to the handle of the atlatl and let the peg or spike push the spear forward. It was like an extension of his arm. As he swung his arm forward and snapped his wrist, he was making use of one of the basic tools, a lever, with his wrist acting as the fulcrum. And every part of the game he killed was used. Aside from the meat for food, the bones and sinew made tools and the hides provided clothing.
A lot of people might not understand how to treat the hides and how they got the hides really nice and soft and white like this and very pliable so they could use it for their clothing, teepees, whatever else they might need to use it for, or like in this case, a blanket made out of the bison skin. What we know from the Native Americans today and what we think might have been happening for a very long time is that they actually take the brains. If you can see, this is a skull from a modern bison, and you can see the top part has been cut off. But we do know that they have used the brains of the bison and other animals, work it into a paste, and use it to treat the hides, to tan the hides, starting to stretch it out, scrape all of the tendons and all the fat off of it, all of the skin to make it the right thickness, and work it in, and then they leave it to dry like that. And when it dries, it's going to be buttery white, very white and soft and pliable.
This life-size statue of Bison antiquus stands 10 feet high at the shoulders, and these horns were not just decoration.
This is the ancient bison, and all of our bronze statues are life-size to give you an idea about how huge these animals were. Now, of course, these are the animals that lived right at the end of the last ice age. You can see how I barely come up to his eyeballs, and I'm 5'1", to give you an idea how huge this animal is. This was the guy that was living out here right when people started coming into this area. This is one of the main reasons they were here. They were following these very large animals. Now this is the hump that is still present on the modern bison too. And that actually is not a hump to store water or anything else like what a lot of people think. It actually is an extension of their vertebra, their backbones. And it goes up to support this huge heavy head that they have. And they had to have these huge slabs of muscle attached somewhere, and so they developed this extension on their vertebra to support their heavy head. I don't know if I would have wanted to be hunting this guy with just a spear.
Ancient man also shared the prairie with this formidable creature about 8,000 to 10,000 years ago. The short-faced bear stood 7 feet tall on all fours and would have been close to 15 feet tall on its hind legs.
This guy, again, was around right at the end of the Ice Age and was one of the biggest predators that we had out here. He probably would have even hunted the people, which is why people didn't normally live around this bear. But here at Lubbock Lake, they did. And not only that, we have found out by looking at his bones that we have uncovered, the bones actually have scrape marks made from those flint tools that we were talking about earlier. And those scrape marks tell us, without any other information, that people were actually using this bear for his meat, for food, and possibly for his hide, for the clothing, just like the bison skin. So we know that not only were people living with this guy, but they were using him as a resource as well.